Hi everyone, welcome to this hopefully short video about the mentor role for SW6016 and some recent updates and a few actual plans for the future. Oh, I know this is January 2024, it's actually February, but anyway. So I asked for a bit of feedback, questions, what might be useful to you, and got several responses. There's a few more than what's noted here, but some of them were doubling up. So this is a synopsis of what was said. So I'm going to break these down into what we can do, what we can't do, and what we're working on. So let's see how we go. So what we can do, there's a lot of different forms to be completed, etc., etc. Yes, there is the information available about those things. There's a series of short videos, which I'll send the links out for those again. That covers mentoring agreements, index of evidence, things of that nature. They're kind of generic. A lot of them are at level 4. Same principles tend to apply. We just want better quality work as we go through levels 5 and 6. The abbreviations, things of that nature, are in on-the-job learning handbook. Kind of think that's probably the best way to access that kind of information, and I will send that out again. It will be helpful to have links for a forum, etc., where mentors can share questions and concerns. Yeah, I'm going to set up new dates for that again. I suppose I'd have to say that my experience so far is that kind of set up about 10 sessions last year at various different times and days, try to enable as many people to attend as possible. And a typical response will be, say, like today, the 5th of February, about 10, 12 people will actually kind of accept the meeting and about 2 will attend. Now, I don't mind talking to a couple of people about whatever's going on for them at the moment. I'm quite happy to do that, but it doesn't seem to be the best use of time. I don't know, what else can I say without be coming across finger wagging. I know how people, how busy people are. You know, I'm wondering about that. There's a little bit here about ASYE and apprentices finishing a placement and what happens then before the ASYE. There is a bit of work to be done about that. Our learning, a lot of it's going to come from the cohort who have just qualified. Mostly they are in ASYEs, but not all of them. So I think towards April or something like that, maybe even a bit later in the year, we'll start having a bit more in-depth discussion. And that discussion will be informed by what kind of plans employers might have. So that's clearly an issue that needs dealing with. We are kind of working on it, trying to work out what to say. So we'll have to wait a little bit longer. Emphasis for the apprentices on ongoing submissions and indexes of evidence. Well, that seems entirely right to me. They really should be passed on the index of evidence past your desk about once a month, thereabouts, on the principle of what gets looked at gets done. So I'll be sending them a little message about keeping the index going. And in fact, I have a session with them on the 28th of February where we're going to talk about decision-making models and things of that nature, which should help in their assignments, and I will send out a version of that to the mentors. This is the unfortunate bit of what we can't do, and there are a lot of people under a lot of pressure at the moment. You know, we have I suppose, a confluence of various things, the lasting impact of austerity and the continuing impact of austerity, quite the same things, because it gets worse as it goes on. Kind of lack of leadership and direction from government in terms of some major issues in children and adult social care that have not been resolved. So I think that definitely has an impact. And difficulties in recruitment and retention of staff, turnover, all the issues we're kind of like far too used to rehearsing. But I kind of think that at the minute, particularly with local authority budgets, extremely dodgy altogether. And some local authorities, an increasing number of local authorities actually essentially filing bankruptcy notices. That's the context that we're in. Now, I can't change the context, but in terms of how work is handled, I can have empathy and sympathy for that. But anything to do with work basically is the employer's responsibility, not mine. Employers have entered into a contract to essentially grow their own social workers. I still think that's a really good idea. But of course, there's time and effort and money costs involved in that. So I can express my uh, understanding. That's about all I can do about those kind of issues. Not great, eh? But there you go. It's kind of realistic. What we are working on, there is a bit about actually getting staff to undertake the mentoring role. Now, that won't affect most of the people who are watching this video, because if you're watching this, you are mentoring after all. But there are some apprentices who don't have mentors. So we have been exploring the idea with employers that they could employ freelance practice educators to do the mentoring role. So to take some of those responsibilities away to fill some gaps. So we're kind of quite a way down that, because we have canvassed employers, did a survey, various things like that. So we have enough information to at least outline what the possibilities might be. So watch this space, and that perhaps may reduce some of the pressure on the front line. Emphasis on the apprentices and the importance of ongoing submissions. I have kind of mentioned that in the last one, but again, it is something that sending them out an announcement about that. But very quickly on the 28th, we'll be doing that in a bit more detail and trying to get them to work out what do they need in their final portfolio, which I'll turn to briefly here. And that is due in June. This is the thorny issue, number 3 here. Mentor access to assignment outlines and other materials. That includes templates, recording, etc., etc. Well, I've tried several different versions of that. Importing or allowing access for all the mentors onto Canvas. There's about 150 people. There's no back office support, incidentally, for this kind of thing. Proved and practical both on the technical level and just kind of realism, because it won't be me, basically. But there are GDPR problems which exist for both yourselves in employment and for ourselves in Kingston, and then 2 sets of firewalls to navigate. So every time I come up with a solution, it seems to be kind of not workable for some reason. So I have booked in to see an IT specialist in the department to try to kind of resolve this, because I know it would be helpful to have one place where you could go to get all of these things. It's been beyond me so far to actually be able to make that happen. I suspect that maybe a separate website is what's required, but watch this space and we'll try yet again to do something about that. The invitations for mentor involvement as teaching consultants. There are some people who are mentors who have done a bit of teaching. We use a lot of members of staff in employing agencies to come in and talk to students. We certainly value experience, and that's the most important part of it. It's not just kind of explaining to people about, you know, what is Section 47 or 42 for that matter. It's life experience, professional experience, telling the story, the narratives of how these things actually work in practice, most valuable things. Now, we have a lot of people involved, and basically we get people to do things thematically. So, you know, we might have a session on supervision, use, or whatever it happens to be, and we'll be looking for people who have specialist knowledge on those kind of issues. Now, a lot of those teams are already covered by people who are acting as what we call teaching consultants. But it's kind of, I'm not suggesting you don't ask me, but it's more a case of tell me what you want to offer, really, rather than me having to go out and find people, because there's a lot of lecturers who've got a lot of links and a lot of social work around the country, mine just in London, and tend to kind of maybe this is not a good thing, but tend to kind of ask the same people to come in and do things. So if you are interested in teaching, you can contact me, but you need to be pretty specific about what you want to do, what specific added value you will bring to that. But as I say, quite happy to continue to have conversations on that. Now, for the next few slides, I am using slides that are already, what I'm calling, so I'm not going to speak through these slides, I'm just going to use them as a template to kind of explain a couple of bits and pieces that might be of use. So we noticed that the standards, yes, the standards are a bit of a dog's dinner because there's at least 3 or 4 they have to consider. We did put out a tool recently that helps people match the apprenticeship standards PCF. A lot of people said it's a little bit confusing. Yes, it is a bit confusing. I know full well about that because there's so many standards, so many boxes to tick. Let me just say 2 things about this. One, if they're starting off from the PCF, that's generally the way to go rather than start from the apprenticeship standards. If they meet all the PCF, they will meet the IATE. They can use the tools to kind of show how that mapping occurs. But that's not really quite enough, is it? So even though I must admit to some reluctance to do this, I am going to do a video about how you map standards. I mean, it will be like boring, won't be the word, but perhaps it'll be useful, which is perhaps the most important descriptor. So I will be doing this in the next week or so. Workloads continue on the same, really. Mainly people are getting some reduction, not always, particularly if they're back to an original team where they're seen as a safe pair of hands. We might have to make different recommendations to employers about that next year. So anything to do with employment or employers is the employer's responsibility. So we make suggestions, etc., but we can't tell employers what to do. In a similar way, they suggest to us about teaching, what kind of things would be useful to have on the curriculum, but our lead role is in teaching. So we have that kind of broad distinction between what happens, which in the main is the distinction that actually works out real right. I suppose I would have to ask you, are people getting reflective time? Sometimes they get it, sometimes they don't get it. I mean, I think really they do need that. It is a requirement of placements. Please try to do that if you possibly can. A lot of the time, the apprentices are using that to do assignments, reflective logs, things of that nature, and that time is valuable for their learning. The next time they come into class, the 26th of Feb, it'll be about decision-making models, things of that nature. And I will do a brief summary of that material and send it out in the same way as I did for their last recall day, as we call them. So this is about, well, what was going to happen? Well, that's already happened, right? So that's September to December. And these are the things that are going to be happening now. So they have mostly submitted their first draft critical reflection. I've had to extend the time for that. I read them whenever they come in, basically, really. That's the way I approach that. And there should be a second tripartite. And if that hasn't happened, please do that. It's a requirement. The department of this, that, and the other will come down on us like a ton of bricks and start to ask money back if we don't keep those kind of things going. That's the kind of necessary evil of the modern era, is it not? Kind of computer accountability. That's how life goes. A lot of people are doing their review of the FPLE agreement. Mainly, what I found myself using those reviews is to kind of map, first of all, if learning opportunities are happening, and they are. But the second bit of it is thinking about, well, there might be rarefied learning opportunities, things that don't happen very often. And is it possible to plan for those things for the second half of the placement? Also, you'd be also looking for things where maybe a little bit more input or learning on the part of the apprentice is required for some aspects of practice, where there's areas for development. So that's the main focus of the reviews. And that will be led by the apprentice and the mentor yourselves, with oversight by the SRA. Index of evidence should be up to date, as should the attendance record. And once all those things are done, you've set the kind of baseline or given sufficient information that when the mentor when the SRA writes the final report in about May, usually be kind of middle of May, thereabouts, they're doing so from a solid basis. We'd expect all the SRAs to sit down with the mentor and the apprentice, kind of go through the evidence, review learning in some detail before that report is finished. So KU Recall Day, I've already mentioned, 28th of this month, not too far away. And there will be a second direct observation. So I've given a date here, 25th of March, but these are formative assignments. So the dates are kind of advisory. Nothing happens in terms of marks if it's not in by then. But my suggestion is spend February getting all that review stuff done, all the documents, all those kind of things in place. And the second direct observation by mentors or another member staff, doesn't always have to be the mentor, in March. I think that was, roughly speaking, best timing for it, because other things are happening. There's a second draft critical analysis in April, and at that stage you're getting pretty close to the finishing line. We have another recall day, and that'll be more about tidying up what needs to be done, things of that nature, kind of noting any gaps, making some calculations about days, if people have enough time and all those kind of things. And then there will be, at the end of that month, at the final tripartite meeting, final FPLE review, which will be the final one for the year. As you can see, on the 17th, they submit their portfolios. There is likely to be in July a final tripartite. We have actually made efforts to try to reduce them from 4 to 3. We've done our bit, and so we're just waiting back for the answer. We got generally positive noises about that. So it may be that we don't have to do a fourth, which will give us a little bit of flexibility in when the second and third might be, if you see what I mean. But fingers crossed, we'll see how that goes. And just remember, or to remind really what's in the portfolio. I mean, they know all of these things. The final practice agreement and review we've talked about. 2 direct observations, you'll do the second one. The mentors, the SRAs rather, should have done the first one. Feedbacks from those observations, or that can't be gotten from that observation, from another person with lived experience. And the new thing this year, 2 feedback from professionals. So that's other professionals the apprentice has worked with. Now that shouldn't be too difficult. It certainly wasn't too difficult last year. Nobody had any problems getting 2 of those in. And again, in February, I'll be talking to the apprentices about that. The rest, you can see the final FPLE review, led by the SRA, and the attendance record, which is basically just ticking the box, but nonetheless has to be in place. There's 2 critical analyses. So they've done these. I sent out a little video about it, but it turns out actually one of the additional things about it is some of these critical analyses are more kind of long-term, about complex casework that they have been doing. And of course, the nature of that is it happens over time. So quite a lot of the apprentices did something like that. And the first one, my advice to them is keep working on this, because you've got a lot of good stuff here, but let's see what happens over the longer term and how that changes your decisions, and kind of continue to develop that work until it's ready to go into the final portfolio. And as a kind of a counterbalance to that, to consider perhaps something a bit more like what we would call critical incident analysis, an important moment in your learning that you can still link to decision making, but perhaps in a more micro and contained way, if you see what I mean. So again, I will be talking to them about that a little bit more, particularly with critical incident analysis, and giving them some guidance on how to do that. So they'll still be under these general themes, but there's kind of a sub theme about, well, you could make one of them longer and one of them shorter, basically, really. Not to put too fine a point on it, try to give them a little bit of flexibility on how that's done. The last little bits, well, you can see these recall days, these online drop-in sessions. They have people in the library to support them and various things like that. But what about yourselves? So those days are all gone, hence grayed out. And we have 2 sessions here, online mentoring sessions. welcome to come along to, but I haven't put in the rest of them. So if you have suggestions in particular about timing of sessions, what might work better for you, bearing in mind I am trying to put something together. Suspicion, as I said earlier, that it may need a whole new website where people can just access materials for the course, and that might be relevant to your role as a mentor. We will be trying to kind of resolve that. It's a bit of a thorny issue that has, in fact, gone on for far too long, really, to be honest. That's my responsibility. If you have further questions, you know I am happy to meet people individually if that is going to help in any way, shape, or form. Your SRA should be the first point of call, but if occasionally people kind of can't resolve things themselves, feel free to come to me. Or if you just want to kind of email me a brief question, I'm more than happy to answer that. So I suppose from this presentation, just 22 minutes, it perhaps has raised some questions of itself, but some of the things I've said about what we intend to do, I will be acting on them. And as ever, I suppose my final note would be, if you want to contact me or whatever, please do so. And I think that's enough for today. Bye.